This place is like hell on earth.
Some places are so dark, stepping inside makes you regret every mistake you ever made.
This is a pretty big cell for solitary, and when they constructed this prison, the outer walls have extra layers of iron bars and struts, so the prisoners could not dig their way out.
These are the world's most dangerous prisons, where the air is thick with dread and survival is a daily battle.
Russia's Black Dolphin prison houses some of the country's toughest, most violent criminals.
Hope is a distant memory, and fear is the only rule. Escape is a myth, and the stories from these walls are rarely told, if they ever get out at all.
There's not anything being done about what's happening at Rikers Island. Restrooms, toilets would not flush, the sinks would not work. It was disgusting.
This is an absolutely iconic building across the whole of Latin America. There's really nothing like it.
Welcome to El Helicoid in Caracas, Venezuela, a place so shocking it almost defies belief. Once a shopping center, it now holds political prisoners in the harshest conditions imaginable. Imagine a labyrinth of dark, cramped cells where hygiene is a distant memory and food is a luxury. But that's not even the worst part. It's the constant surveillance, the cruel routine that strips away every ounce of hope, and the brutal treatment that prisoners face daily. If you're unlucky enough to be caught here, you're trapped in a cycle of oppression with no way out. El Helicoid is a place where the fight for survival is real, and freedom feels like a distant dream.
Fueron 2 años, 6 meses y 8 días viviendo en el centro de tortura quizás más grande de Venezuela.
Shut it down now. And here's the shocking story of Carandiru Penitentiary in Sao Paulo, Brazil, once home to over 8,000 prisoners in an overcrowded, suffocating hellhole. The walls of Carandiru witnessed one of the most catastrophic prison riots in history, leading to a horrifying bloodbath in 1992. Disease and filth ran rampant here, with HIV epidemics spiraling out of control. This was a place where lawlessness ruled, and survival was a daily gamble. After the riot, Carandiru became synonymous with despair. In 2002, this prison was finally shut down and demolished, but its legacy, the terror, and the injustice will haunt Brazil forever. It's one of the darkest chapters in the prison world.
A sua moral, sua autoestima é jogada pro chão. Então, quando eles chegam aqui, eles chegam com a semelhança de quem estava apodrecendo atrás das grades.
Abashiri prison.
This is a pretty big cell for solitary, and when they constructed this prison, the outer walls have extra layers of iron bars and struts, so the prisoners could not dig their way out.
A prison whose environment is colder than its location. It is built in the remote northern reaches of Japan and was once a place of punishment where prisoners endured labor and harsh winters. Though this place is cold and bone-chilling, it's what goes on inside that's truly bone-chilling. This prison pushed inmates to their physical and mental limits. While it has since been transformed into a museum, the eerie stories of hardship and discipline still can be heard within its walls. Visitors today walk through the remnants of a facility where survival was a daily struggle and harsh winters made life nearly unbearable.
But the windows were too high for the prisoners to look out.
Haiti National Penitentiary.
This place is like hell on earth. There are scores of men in there, emaciated, visibly sick, and they've all been crammed into the same room.
This hellish place in Port-au-Prince stands as a grim testament to overcrowding and neglect. Originally built to hold fewer than 900 inmates, it now houses over 4,000, leaving little room for movement, let alone comfort. Prisoners face dire conditions, with food so scarce that malnutrition runs rampant, and violence breaks out frequently over the smallest of resources. Many inmates remain trapped in this hellish environment indefinitely, awaiting trials that never come.
I'm told that some of their families don't know they're here, some of them have been there for years.
A place where justice is absent and hope has long been lost. This penitentiary is a stark reminder of a system that has failed those within its walls. Alcatraz Island.
What do you think of Alcatraz prison?
Yeah, it's very depressing.
Nicknamed The Rock, was once home to America's most notorious criminals, isolated in the icy waters of San Francisco Bay. Known for its strict routines and harsh conditions, life on the island was as bleak as the surroundings. Prisoners were cut off from the outside world, forced to endure constant surveillance, isolation, and limited human contact. Escaping was virtually impossible due to the frigid waters and strong currents. Though Alcatraz ceased operating as a prison in 1963, its eerie history lives on. Today, it stands as a museum, preserving the chilling atmosphere of confinement and the ghosts of its past inhabitants.
This Alcatraz Island model is from 1952, and you can see it inside.
Kerobokan Prison.
You know, you can see it as my head touches the wall here, and my feet touch the wall on that side.
In the tropical heat of Bali lies Kerobokan Prison, where the term Hotel K is a cruel joke. Overcrowded and chaotic, this facility holds both local and international criminals.
You know, Zimbabweans and Russians and Ugandans and Iranians, Australians, Kiwis, all, you know, every nationality.
With conditions that are anything but forgiving. Corruption runs rampant within the prison's walls, allowing wealthier inmates to bribe their way to better conditions, while the poor are left to their own devices. Medical supplies are scarce, food is inadequate, and they have to look over their shoulders every second. So prisoners must rely on alliances for survival.
Yeah, with the negative mindset, I think there's a lot of dark holes you can fall into as well.
Prison in Bronx.
There's not anything being done about what's happening at Rikers Island. Restrooms, toilets would not flush, the sinks would not work. It was disgusting.
Rikers Island, one of New York City's most notorious prisons, is infamous for its overcrowding and poor conditions. Home to a mix of most serious offenders and pretrial detainees, Rikers is plagued by frequent confrontations between inmates and guards. The jail's overcrowded, unsanitary environment only adds to its gruff reputation. With inadequate health care and mental health services, inmates are left vulnerable to misuse and neglect, and lack of basic needs have made it one of the most feared correctional facilities in the United States.
I don't want to live in the project forever. I want to move, like somewhere far, like North Dakota or something, somewhere that nobody plans on going.
Incorrect Correctional Center.
Both of our jobs, we always kind of remind each other to stay vigilant, you know, always have situational awareness is something we always talk about.
Potosi Correctional Center in Missouri is a high-security facility designed to house the nation's most dangerous criminals. Inside, prisoners face near total isolation, with many confined to solitary cells, cut off from any meaningful human contact. Surveillance is constant, and rehabilitation opportunities are minimal, leaving little room for redemption. The atmosphere is one of cold, oppressive control, where every day serves as a reminder of the harsh reality that those inside face. The focus at Potosi is on containment and discipline, with no space for hope, as the prisoners live in silence, awaiting their uncertain futures.
I have an 8-hour day, but that's if everything goes right. So he always asks me before I leave, you know, what's today look like? And I always say, I plan to be home by 5:15, but that's not always the case.
Symbol of hate.
What is going on literally behind closed doors are crimes against humanity, systematic torture.
Once a symbol of Syria's political tyranny, Tadmor prison held those who dared to challenge the regime, particularly political dissidents. Situated in the desert, its isolation added to the cruel conditions faced by its prisoners. The prison's dark history earned it a reputation as one of the most notorious facilities in the world. Although it was demolished, the legacy of Tadmor endures, serving as a chilling reminder of Syria's history of severe punishment and repression against its people.
To understand this whole world that is this prison, we have to only rely on the memory of the people who have been there.
School, prison, museum.
Imagine this contrast. Smiling faces of teenage boys and girls, because this was their high school. They would come here to learn. They'd be educated in those classrooms.
Tuol Sleng, S21, was once a school, but under the Khmer Rouge regime, it became a place of unimaginable horror, Political prisoners were dragged here, subjected to brutal interrogations, and tortured in the most gruesome ways. Today, it stands as a haunting museum, preserving the remnants of Cambodia's darkest history. The cells, the instruments of torment, and the echoes of suffering remain as chilling reminders of what happened here. Tuol Sleng isn't just a museum. It's a stark, painful journey into the past, where the memory of the atrocities is kept alive, so they're never forgotten.
They would take the prisoners with their arms tied behind their backs, and they would tie the rope to their arms, literally to their wrists right here. They would then hoist them up this way. You can just imagine the pain.
No humanity.
If drug shortages to treat their conditions, they suffer from different types of conditions.
Chikurubi prison in Zimbabwe is a place where humanity seems to vanish. Overcrowded and neglected, this prison is infamous for holding political prisoners under deplorable conditions. Imagine cells so cramped that 40 men squeeze into spaces built for a fraction of that number. Food and water are scarce, and disease, particularly tuberculosis, spreads like wildfire. Guards and inmates alike inflict violence, adding to the never-ending cycle of suffering. With no rehabilitation programs to speak of, life inside Chikurubi is a brutal existence where survival is a struggle and basic human rights are a distant memory.
This morning, we had a total of 2,508 inmates against a holding capacity of 1,360.
Mexican Federal Prison. Islas Marias. Federal prison was no ordinary facility. It was a remote island fortress, far from the Mexican mainland. Inmates were isolated from everything and everyone, left to face grueling labor under the unforgiving sun. Cramped cells, poor sanitation, and a complete lack of medical care made survival a daily struggle. The isolation wasn't just physical, it was psychological too. Disease ran rampant, and prisoners were forgotten by the world. Though now a cultural center, the island's history of suffering remains, etched in the soil and the silence, echoing the painful lives once trapped there.
Over the decades, this remote Mexican island, located out in the Pacific Ocean, has been home to tens of thousands of inmates and thousands more public servants working for Mexico's penal system.
SHU. Now let's talk about the Secure Housing Unit, Pelican Bay State Prison's infamous SHU. This is where the darkest corners of isolation exist, where inmates are sent into solitary confinement for years. Total isolation. Can you imagine being trapped in a tiny, windowless cell with barely any human contact? But it's only for those that deserve it. It's a prison within a prison, a place designed to test human endurance in ways most of us can't even imagine. The darkness here isn't just physical, it's mental too. Dark prison. Let me take you to La Modelo prison in Bogota, Colombia, a place where chaos reigns supreme. Picture this: overcrowded cells, gang conflicts, and constant terror from every corner. The guards barely in control, the inmates locked in a daily struggle to survive. This is as common as the air they breathe, and riots erupt like clockwork. Inside, prisoners are at the mercy of ruthless gangs that run the show, leaving those without protection in constant danger. La Modelo isn't just a prison, it's a battlefield where the weak are swallowed whole, and the only law that matters is survival. This place is a living nightmare. Camp 22. Camp 22, hidden deep in North Korea's mountains, is a place so secretive that it is barely acknowledged by the outside world. Known for housing political prisoners, this prison operates under the most horrific conditions imaginable. Inmates are forced into grueling labor, working in mines and fields for hours on end, subjected to physical exhaustion and extreme deprivation. What makes Camp 22 even more horrifying is the concept of guilt by association. Prisoners' families are often detained and forced to suffer alongside them, making escape and hope nearly impossible. Human crops. a place known as The Farm, not because it's peaceful, but because it's a farm of endless labor. Imagine this, sprawling fields under the scorching Louisiana sun, where inmates are forced to work long hours, day after day, under unfavorable conditions. This massive max-security prison houses some of the most notorious criminals, and its history is questionable. With few opportunities for rehabilitation and an iron-fisted control by guards, Angola is a place where hope is scarce, and life sentences feel like eternity. The air smells like sweat and desperation. This place doesn't let you forget where you are for a second. Polar owl. Located in the icy wilderness of Siberia, Polar Owl Prison or Carp Prison is isolated in the coldest regions of Russia. Inmates here endure bone-chilling temperatures, especially harsh during the lengthy, dark winter months. Known as a prison for lifers, Polar Owl houses criminals in near-permanent isolation. Cells are tiny, offering no relief from the harsh, biting cold that seeps into every corner. Communication between prisoners is severely restricted, and guards use these conditions as a form of psychological nightmare. The prison's extreme remoteness makes escape impossible and reinforces the sense of hopeless isolation that defines daily life here. Correctional Facility, USA. Sing Sing, one of America's oldest and most infamous prisons, has long been a symbol of tough justice. Known for housing notorious criminals, it's earned a reputation for its strict and high-security environment. While conditions have improved over time, the prison still operates under rigid rules, originally infamous for harsh punishments and solitary confinement. Not a holiday site for anyone. Nairobi Prison. Notorious for overcrowding and lack of funding, this shows a grim reality for those incarcerated within. Built for around 800 inmates, the facility now crams thousands into small, unsanitary cells. With inadequate resources, diseases spread like wildfire, and violence becomes a part of daily life. Inmates struggling to survive rely on family support for basic needs. Guards, overwhelmed by the numbers, enforce order through force. Nairobi Prison starkly highlights the dire state of Kenya's penal system, where survival is the ultimate challenge, and hope is a rare commodity in a harsh, unforgiving environment. Lurigancho Prison. It is in Peru, a place where chaos reigns. Overflowing with inmates, it's controlled by powerful gangs who dominate the limited resources, leaving the guards powerless to maintain order. Food is scarce, and conflicts happen where weaker prisoners are at the mercy of the merciless. Overcrowded and decaying, the facility becomes a microcosm of lawlessness, with each day posing a new survival challenge. Lurigancho's environment is a reflection of the dangerous, chaotic world within its walls, where alliances are the only means to stay safe, and fear is an ever-present companion. Sabaneta Prison. A place in Venezuela which is infamous for its rampant corruption and overcrowded conditions. Within its walls, gangs hold immense power over prisoners, controlling resources and dictating the prison's harsh, daily life. The lack of basic resources and the constant threat of riots and disease makes survival difficult, with inmates having to go through an unpredictable environment. Sabaneta is a place where alliances are vital and trust is scarce. Its brutal conditions highlight the controlling nature of Venezuela's penal system, and inmates must constantly brace for the next outbreak of chaos. Central Jail, Kashimpur. Central Jail in Bangladesh is a sprawling facility known for its severe overcrowding and lack of basic human necessities. Thousands of prisoners, including political detainees and hardened criminals, are crammed into cells with little regard for sanitation. The frequent outbreaks of disease, combined with constant conflicts between inmates, create a volatile atmosphere. Resources like food, medical care, and protection are scarce, and mistreatment by guards is common. Life at Kashimpur is relentless, with little opportunity for relief or justice. For many, it's a hopeless existence, trapped within a broken system. La Santé. La Santé prison in Paris is infamous for the psychological torment it inflicts on inmates. Isolated in small, cramped cells, prisoners experience extreme solitude with limited human contact, making mental deterioration common. Despite reforms, it remains a symbol of France's harsh penal system, where inmates are imprisoned both physically and mentally, facing a life marked by constant anguish. No revolution. Inside, located in Lyon, Saint-Quentin-Fallavier is France's fortress for its most dangerous offenders. This high-security prison is known for its unyielding control, where strict routines and constant surveillance leave little room for freedom. The towering walls and tight restrictions ensure that escape is nearly impossible, and inmates are kept isolated from the outside world. The environment is tightly managed, creating a suffocating atmosphere where every movement is monitored, reinforcing France's severe approach to dealing with its most hardened criminals. Flooded with people. Gitarama, one of the world's most overcrowded prisons, is a place where suffering is a daily reality. Originally built to house 400 prisoners, it regularly holds thousands in horrific conditions. With scarce resources, including food, clean water, and medical care, the prison is a breeding ground for disease and outrage. Inmates live in constant fear and exhaustion, with malnutrition and neglect claiming many lives. The overcrowding and lack of basic necessities make survival here something impossible and a challenging uphill climb for the strongest. Chilling Island. Nestled on a remote island in Lake Novozero, Petak Island Prison is a chilling fortress reserved for Russia's most dangerous criminals. Completely isolated by icy waters, escape is almost impossible. Inmates live in small, solitary cells, deprived of social interaction and subjected to relentless routines. Known as White Hell, the atmosphere is cold and desolate, with a constant threat of harsh punishments hanging over every moment. The isolation here is not just physical, it is psychological. For those locked away on Petak Island, life becomes an endless struggle against the biting cold, oppressive silence, and the crushing weight of solitude. Iranian jailhouse. Evin Prison, on the outskirts of Tehran, holds a dark reputation as a symbol of oppression in Iran. Often referred to as Evin University, it is notorious for holding political prisoners, journalists, and activists. Life inside is bleak and harsh, with overcrowded cells, squalid conditions, and tough interrogations. Families live in constant fear, unsure if their loved ones will ever return. Despite global outcry, Evin remains a prison of silence, where individuals are forced to go through it in secrecy. The walls here are thick with fear and despair, holding secrets that may never be revealed to the world outside. Stay away. New Bell Prison in Cameroon is one of Africa's most overcrowded and chaotic correctional facilities. Built to hold 800 inmates, it now houses over 5,000, leading to inhumane, cramped conditions where inmates fight for survival. The unsanitary, overcrowded cells leave no space for comfort, and the lack of basic medical care allows diseases like tuberculosis and malaria to spread uncontrollably. Disagreements, to put it nicely, between prisoners are frequent, with many living in constant fear. Inmates awaiting trial often languish in these grim conditions for years, forgotten and forsaken, making New Bell a stark reminder of the dire reality of overcrowded prisons. ADX Florence. Known as the Alcatraz of the Rockies, is America's most secure supermax prison, housing the nation's most dangerous criminals. Inmates here endure extreme isolation, confined to small, windowless concrete cells for 23 hours a day. With no human interaction and only a sliver of sunlight during recreation, the prison's strict routine wears down even the toughest minds. Meals are passed through slots, and every aspect of life is controlled to break down prisoners, both mentally and physically. prisoners' own prison. When you step inside Takumbu prison, you'll see a sprawling, overcrowded nightmare where the inmates hold the reins. Built to house 800, but home to over 4,000, this prison is a lawless world where gangs control the game. Corruption thrives, and wealthier prisoners pay for better conditions, while the rest suffer in cramped, filthy cells. Riots are a constant threat as power struggles rage. Here, survival depends on navigating a dangerous hierarchy where violence and manipulation are the only currencies. Takumbu is South America's deadly underworld, where brutality and the fight for control are a daily reality. It's not just a prison, it's its own dark society. Kamiti Prison. This isn't just a facility, it's something worse. Originally built for 800, it now cramps in thousands, with each cell a suffocating cage. Sanitation is poor, food and water barely meet the needs of the overcrowded population, and disease spreads like wildfire. Inmates fight for basic resources, and guards keep order with force. Many prisoners wait years for trial, forgotten by a justice system overwhelmed and unable to cope. Kamiti stands as a stark example of Kenya's penal nightmare, and hope is as rare as a decent meal here. But still, survival is the only priority. Polar wolf. Even deeper into Siberia, Polar Wolf Prison stands as one of the most remote and brutal correctional facilities in the world. The prison's extreme isolation in the vast wilderness forces inmates to endure bone-chilling temperatures, where the cold seeps into every corner of their small cells. Inmates are kept in isolation, deprived of human contact, and subjected to the harshest living conditions. The guards, trained to maintain absolute control, ensure the prisoners remain cut off from any hope of comfort or redemption. With minimal heating, inadequate food, and no means of escape, Polar Wolf breaks both the body and the spirit.
They are just trying to make his life as unbearable as it possibly can be.
Russian, don't mind. Built to hold 3,000, it was often packed with over 10,000, forcing prisoners to take turns sleeping in tiny, suffocating cells. Sanitation nearly non-existent. The air is thick with disease outbreaks, including tuberculosis, making every breath a risk. Strict discipline and harsh conditions ruled the day, and inmates were left to suffer in silence. Kresty was a symbol of Russia's brutal penal system until its closure in 2017. It's a chilling reminder of a system where punishment was a relentless force, both physically and mentally. Actual Great Wall. Near Beijing is China's ultimate fortress, a place where high-profile political prisoners are kept in near-complete isolation. Here, the walls are thicker, the surveillance tighter, and the control absolute. Prisoners live in small cells with minimal contact with the outside world or fellow inmates. It's a place designed to break the spirit, with every movement monitored by highly trained guards. For dissidents, Xinjiang is not just a prison. It's a quiet, relentless punishment, a place where silence speaks louder than words, and resistance is met with complete isolation. Today's subscriber's pick has made me uncomfortable, so proceed with caution. Known as the Hanoi Hilton by American POWs, Hoa Lo Prison was a place where suffering knew no bounds. Originally built by the French to hold Vietnamese political prisoners, it later became infamous for housing American pilots captured during the Vietnam War. The conditions were not good at all. I mean, the prisoners were crammed into small, claustrophobic cells with barely enough food to survive. Psychological torment, inadequate care, and other bad things were routine. It's a museum, yes, but one steeped in the shadows of suffering no one wants to remember. Suffocating prison.
It's like drowning, you know, in a sea of people, you know, because you get swamped up by these guys, and and everybody's slapping you and searching you and prodding you and taunting you and laughing at you and shoving you around and pulling you.
Black Beach Prison in Equatorial Guinea. Just hearing the name sends shivers down your spine. This hellish place, known for violating basic human rights, holds political prisoners and dissidents in the most extreme conditions. Cells are overcrowded, filthy, and devoid of air, almost suffocating. Prisoners endure starvation, neglect, and relentless psychological torment. Isolation is the norm, with inmates subjected to a daily battle for survival. Black Beach is a place where hope and dignity are suffocated, making it one of the most feared and repressive prisons in the world. You wouldn't wish it on your worst enemy.
If you've done wrong, and they don't want you, they
just put you there.
Yeah.
Don't breathe in here.
Actually launching the festive season security campaign as part of the festive season safety and security drive of our government.
Pollsmoor Prison in Cape Town was built for 4,000. It now holds over 8,000, creating a boiling cauldron of tension and chaos. Gangs dominate the corridors, leaving guards unable to stem the tide of mercilessness. But the real horror here? The spread of diseases like tuberculosis, thriving in the cramped, unsanitary cells. With inadequate medical care, the prison becomes a breeding ground for illness. Pollsmoor isn't just a prison, it's a crisis, reflecting South Africa's broader struggles with overcrowding and crime. Here, survival is not a given, it's a battle. Might be timid.
Most importantly, to also check the documents that our offenders normally keep. We find records of some transactions, but we're also looking at messages that might be communicating plans for escapes.
This correctional center might not have the over-the-top chaos of other South African prisons, but don't let that fool you. It's no easy place to serve time. This was the final stop for Nelson Mandela, and while it may be less brutal, the rigid control and strict regimen make life here tough. Inmates endure hard labor, limited contact with the outside world, and a structure that leaves little room for freedom. Over the years, conditions have improved, but Drakensberg remains a haunting reminder of the country's apartheid past, a place where justice is administered with unyielding authority. Tibetan Prison. Known as Lhasa Prison. Number 1. This place is notorious for its mistreatment of Tibetan political prisoners. Life here means solitary confinement, physical punishment, and the constant threat of violence. Dropchi isn't just a prison. It's a symbol of resistance in a land where dissent is crushed. For Tibetans, it represents the cost of defiance in one of the most restricted and brutal prison systems in the world. This is where hope is held captive, oppressed, but never fully silenced. Black Dolphin.
Russia's Black Dolphin prison houses some of the country's toughest, most violent criminals.
Located on the Russia-Kazakhstan border, Black Dolphin holds the country's most dangerous offenders. Inmates endure extreme control measures, including blindfolded transfers, constant restraints, and near total isolation. With surveillance 24/7 and no respite, prisoners live in tiny, double-barred cells, working tirelessly under the watchful eyes of guards who check on them every 15 minutes. The brutal atmosphere is designed to break even the toughest minds. It's one of the world's harshest prisons, where despair dominates. Nothing fancy.
To do the crime in Thailand, then perhaps you deserve to do the monumental time. But being here in the Bangkok Hilton, it's hard to imagine how anyone could face spending 25, 30, 50 years in here.
Known as the Bangkok Hilton, Bang Kwang Prison is a far cry from any luxury hotel. This notorious Thai facility houses some of the country's most serious offenders, forcing inmates to endure overcrowded cells and unimaginable conditions. For the first 3 months, they are shackled in iron chains, depending on what they did, which adds psychological pressure and physical challenges. There are limited possibilities for release. Prisoners spend their days battling mental strain and the crushing weight of their circumstances.
Come to Thailand and you think you'll get away with it, be very, very careful.